Hi everybody, this is Professor Diffley. So this is History 100, Early Western Civ. So this is the first of the lecture videos for Chapter 1. So you'll have these for each chapter section we cover. So yeah, this is Chapter 1, first lecture video. So this chapter starts with some introductory material, some terms, some ideas, and then really looks, as you can see, the origins of human civilization up to 1000 BCE. So we don't get into a lot of evolutionary stuff, biology here. You covered that in more classes. This is more starting with the hunter-gatherers and then the first civilizations. What we're going to look at in this chapter is the hunter-gatherers, the first civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, what is today Turkey, Anatolia, and leading up to through the Persians, and we'll begin the next bit with the Greeks. So where we're going to start here again is way back in history. But before we get into that, let's start with this, just some stuff. These first two quotes you're going to see actually appear on the syllabus. I'm including them here. So the first part here is really, why do we even study history? Why does everywhere require it? Because it's useful. It's needed. And you see this with Carl Becker was a famous historian, American. And this quote really captures part of what history is about, right? The history that lies inert in unread books does no work in the world. So what does he mean by that? Excuse me. What Becker is saying here is that, if whatever's in the books, if they're inert, if they're unused, then it doesn't matter what history, what knowledge, what information, what insights are there. We have to read them. We have to access history in order to gain its wisdom or its lessons or whatever. And, this also, the second part, it says it does no work in the world. Well, what that suggests is that history does do some work in the world, right? And that's something we're going to see. Now, you can't always go back in history and find all the answers. That's not the way it works to our current problems. However, it can give you insight, right? We can go back, we can look at choices people made, why they made them, what the results were, so that we could either do things differently, better understand what's going on today, challenges, that sort of thing. So again, this says that history does play a role. It's not just about stories from the past or stories about long dead people. It is really there. It can help us, guide us, help us make sense of our world. And so there is a use for it. But first, to get any use out of it, we need to actually access it, either in books or other mediums there. The other here is from William Faulkner, a novelist. This is "The past is never dead. It's not even past." So the past is never dead. It's not even past. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, usually when you say something is past, it's behind you, right? You've moved on from it. You've moved past it, that sort of thing. What this is saying is the past just doesn't go away. The past is all around us, right? History is all around us. We can see that in, the simple way of seeing historical markers, that sort of thing. But what he's meaning here is the past doesn't just happen. History doesn't just happen and then have no impact going forward. The past is around us. It's not even past because it shaped the world we live in, right? The choices people made, the things they did, that sort of thing shapes the world around us. So to understand that, right, we are the product of choices, of people in the past that came before us. Our world is that sort of thing. And so that's it. The past is never dead. It's not even past. It's still around us. It shapes the world. It helps us really make sense where we are. Now, the last quote here is from another writer, Mark Twain. Usually, students, why, or anybody, why study history? And the first response is always because history repeats itself. So to avoid history repeating itself. Well, honestly, history doesn't repeat itself. Literally, what that would mean is the same thing happens over and over and over again, right? It'd be like the movie Groundhog's Day, where you're repeating the same day over and over. Or what it feels like in quarantine these days is over and over and over, same day, that sort of thing. That's not what happens. So what Twain said instead was history does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And that is more accurate, and that's what I believe, right? It doesn't repeat itself, but we seem to find, if you study history, you'll seem to find people making similar mistakes time after time, right? Finding themselves doing similar things, similar situations, that sort of thing. So it might not rhyme, it might not repeat itself, but it sure looks similar, right? A rhyme, it's similar, that sort of sense. And so, and again, the question is, if we're supposed to learn from history, why do we keep making those same choices or make bad decisions and find ourselves in the same positions? Yeah, that's complicated. That's more about human psychology, that sort of thing. It's something we will see as we move through the class and that. But it often comes down to people either don't know what came before them, or they always think they're going to do it better, right? That yes, I saw how they did it, but they made mistakes. Here's how I'll do things better. That sort of stuff. But yeah, this is a better quote that it often rhymes, and that's true. Some people say history is the study of how things change over time, right? So history is then therefore the study of change. Humans change, either hopefully for the better, that sort of thing. Many would argue, and I tend to believe this too, history can just as often be about how things stay the same over time, right? That things don't really change. Maybe the settings, the technology around them, but a lot of things are similar, and that's one of the things you're going to look at in this class. For the first part here, and throughout is you're going to be starting, what could you find from 3,000 years ago or even further, 10,000, 13,000 years ago? How could that relate to my life today is often the question. Well, you're going to be surprised. A lot of it does. You're going to find a lot of similarities. The basic ones, what do people want? What makes them happy, right? Safety, family, friends, comfort, that sort of thing. That's always going to be the same. You're going to find that pretty much anywhere on the planet. That's true. People generally want the same things for themselves and their families and their loved ones, that sort of thing. But you're also going to see a lot of similarities between the past, right? You're gonna look at, this will be especially a lot of people see this when they see the Greeks and the Romans, and then later medieval Europe. And I think you'll find this all the way back then. You'll find patterns. You'll find things people do, humans do, that are very similar to today and help explain that, so some people often point to greed, to power hungry, that sort of thing. But you'll see a lot of just even how people cope, regular people cope with the day-to-day. All the way from, take one example, horoscopes today, right? People read horoscopes, that sort of thing. Humans have been doing that sort of thing, trying to figure out what the gods want, what the universe wants, what the world's all about forever. And that is something we're going to see. So keep that in mind, throughout this course. And I'm sure there'll be a writing journal or something on this, or a discussion, but a journal most likely on, looking back at this this era that we're about to study and seeing what is similar, what's different, and how do we explain those similarities. So that's really the course setup. That is sort of why we study history. It is important because it will be a running theme throughout the course. So now let's look at this. Let's look at just some terms here. West and Western civilization. Well, what does that even mean? Well, we'll give the traditional definition. This meant history reaching back to the Greco-Romans, so the Greeks and the Romans, right? So their origins and their heritage. This is usually a much narrower view, where it starts with the Greek and Romans, nothing that came before them, and goes through what would ends up being Europe and Western Europe. But yeah, this starts with the Greco-Romans, the traditional definition. That it's largely Christian, right? This is, which is interesting because the Greeks and the Romans for a long time were not Christians, but that gets written into it later after they do convert. But it's often ignored, the pagan past, that sort of thing. The Enlightenment tradition. This is the movement in Europe in the 1700s. United States. The Constitution, Declaration of Independence reflect a lot of Enlightenment principles. Our form of government, even our economic system, those types of things. It's using rationality, logic, trying to look at the world's problems and solve them scientifically. So this draws off the scientific revolution, other things like that. For individualism, personal growth, that the world and society can get better. That's part of the Enlightenment tradition. The modern definition, the one we're using in the course, is a little different, but a lot of similarity. So again, we go back to where did civilization begin, and we see this a lot. The Greeks and the Romans interact with the this area of the world significantly, and the Romans are going to control them for a while. What is today the Middle East? Even the Greeks, we're going to see they're going to borrow a lot from this area, from the Near East, as it was called back then. It's going to be there. So we go all the way back to the cradle of civilization, right? Mesopotamia, where the first cities, first permanent settlements, first cities, first governments, first countries, that sort of thing, and the first civilizations. And all of that is then going to influence what comes before it. Remember, nothing ever happens out of a vacuum, right? It is always influenced by things that came before. So again, we are going to focus on the Greeks and Romans because undoubtedly they have a major impact on Western world, right? Think Europe, the Americas, anybody with those traditions that could trace their origins back there. So, part of the West would include, right, Latin America, places like Australia, things like that, South America, Central America. Why? Because they were founded by European settlers, right? And the countries and the, dominant cultures or cultural values, the dominant ones, are often traced back to Europe. And so, we'll look at the Greeks and the Romans, but we're going to see nothing happens in vacuum. They're influenced by outside events. The newer definition is not just Christian, but it's Judaism and Islam are all parts of the Western tradition, right? Christianity grows out of Judaism. Islam follows in the same the same body of religion there, right? It comes last of these big three. Nothing we can find the Muslim world, what becomes the Muslim world, grows up in what used to be in parts of the Roman world, and really the Roman Empire, the Eastern or the which later the Byzantine. But a lot of that is going to cover. I mean, Islam is going to be a major force and power in Europe, in Spain and Portugal until almost 1500, right, where this course ends. So that's a very, very long time, over 900, 1100 years that you're going to have. That religion as part of Europe, if you compare it up to 1500. So the other, and again, Enlightenment, scientific revolutions, those sorts of things. Again, the difference in these two definitions, the modern definition is a little bit more expansive. It's not so narrow and just including Christians. It goes before the Greeks, recognizing the Greeks and Romans had to get their ideas partly and their tradition partly from somewhere else, even if they put their own spin on it, which they certainly did. Everybody borrows. That's just the way the world works. So, some more stuff. Early terms here, and you can expect these on a quiz exam. What is prehistory? So we use history and prehistory. Prehistory is human existence before the creation of the written word, right? So all prehistory is before there's human writing, and anything after that is history. So it's that's really the difference. So it's pre-civilization because part of being a civilization means you have the ability to record thoughts, writing, writing system. So prehistory is the era before the written word. Everything before the written word, prehistory. Everything after the written word, history. More here. So how do we study prehistory then if there's no records, right? No written records, that sort of thing. We do it in a few ways. Study demography, right? Study of the size group of people, that sort of thing. Their vital statistics. How do you do this? Modern days you take census, but that would leave record. But you tell this by, size of villages, size of homes in archaeology records, which is digging up the past, looking for objects and things they left behind. We could do, one way is the size of the garbage dumps they left. That actually tells you, middens they're often called. That tells you how many people are there, right? Think of, if you have 15 people, they go to a household of, if there's 4 people in a house, how much garbage are they generating? Now, now if there's 20 people in a building or a house, how much more garbage are they going to generate, right? You can start to tell some information by that. Anthropology is the study of actual human beings. So, anthropology is studying human beings, right? Their behavior, biology, all of that. It's studying people. We do this all the time. How does that help us? I mean, we don't got time machines to go back in the past, but we can study what humans do today, right? Like when we want to find out what hunter-gatherers' lives were like, you can study hunter-gatherers today. They still exist in South America, in parts of Asia, parts of Africa. When the Europeans came to the Americas, most Native American groups were hunter-gatherers, right? They didn't have widespread agriculture. We can see their traditions and how they survive in the world with limited technology, same technology people had way back then. We can see how they use it today, and that can tell us about that. Archaeology, again, is the study of the ancient or recent past through material remains, right? Material culture, it's called, what people leave behind. And that can, often the picture is unclear. You have to piece a lot of it together, but you can learn a lot about what people have, their tools, their clothes, that sort of thing, that can help you understand the world that they lived in there. Another way we do this is radiocarbon dating. This just, it really, you don't need to know all this. Once I had a student who wanted to know all the science behind it, so I gave a lot of it here. You don't need to know that for an exam. It's just here if you're interested. It helps us date objects from the past is really what radiocarbon dating is all about. Okay, so we will actually pick up on this slide in lecture video 2 for chapter 1. We'll start here with origins of humanity. All right, thank you.